There you go. Okay, so let's jump in and get started. If you weren't here while I was introducing myself, I am Jessica Payne. I am the founder of Mockingbird Incubator and our sister company, Mockingbird Analytics, that beyond the startup information helps nonprofits get off the ground with grants readiness, technology, and data. So diving in, if you have any questions throughout the presentation, drop them in the chat and I will answer them when we get to the end. So a little bit about us. It's our mission to support and train nonprofit organizations to increase the impact of their work. This means organizations of all sizes, but primarily our incubator program works with startups like yourself. So we have a program that is designed to help new nonprofits with the sort of administrative infrastructure that you need to put into place to run a successful organization. There is a lot of mythology about how if you run a business, you can run a nonprofit. The reality is running a nonprofit is actually very different than a for-profit business. So we want to make sure everybody sort of knows the sort of inside baseball rules that you have to know to be successful in the nonprofit world. We founded Mockingbird Incubator in 2019 as a result of all the clients we were working with on fundraising and technology that were coming to us saying, oh, we're not ready yet. And so we wanted to create a space where we could help people get ready to level up their organizations. So let's start with great reasons to start a nonprofit. This is not a comprehensive list. Obviously, there are a ton of great reasons to start a nonprofit, but some of the really good ones that we like to see is people that have a personal connection to the community that needs support, people that are seeing a geography or population not being served in some way, and people that are sort of developing a sort of unique, innovative method or service to reach people that hasn't been used before. The real key to starting a nonprofit is to make sure that what you're doing is not harmful. So we practice sort of do no harm, harm reduction principles, and also making sure that you are coming into the space to add something and not sort of take away from other existing organizations. We do not believe in competition between nonprofits. We believe in nonprofit ecosystems. So on the flip side, there are some reasons you should not start a nonprofit for sure. And I always want to have sort of a tongue-in-cheek blog about like bad reasons to start a nonprofit because we've seen a lot of them. But here are a couple. If you want to be a millionaire, running a nonprofit is not for you. This is not sort of your ticket to a yacht. Also, if you don't like to hear sad stories or see things that upset you, most nonprofits are dealing with some level of trauma or poverty or something that's not going well for the person or animal or community. So if you're worried about that, maybe a nonprofit, not a great idea. Also, in nonprofit work, especially as founders like you guys, you're going to have to wear many hats at work. Nonprofits are not the places where you just get to sort of stay in your lane. Most nonprofits, especially when you're founding, you're going to do all of the work from moment one, and then eventually you'll have people to support you and you'll get to focus more. But from day one, you're going to be doing a lot of different things. Also, one of the things about nonprofits that people forget about is fundraising. You are going to have to talk about money, ask people for money. If you are not comfortable with that, that's something to consider. Also, another not great reason to start a nonprofit is if you had a bad volunteer experience somewhere else and are just looking to recreate the model so that you can do the work the way that you want. Revenge is not a good reason to start a nonprofit. Find another organization doing something similar if you want to be volunteering somewhere. And last but not least, if you don't know anything about the cause area and you are sort of just looking to start a nonprofit for the sake of starting a nonprofit, also not a great idea. You would be surprised how many people come to us and say, I want to start a nonprofit. What area should I work in? You should really know and have some level of expertise in the cause area that you are serving. So just a friendly reminder, if you have questions throughout, just drop them in the chat. I will get to them by the end. So let's talk a little bit about sort of the difference in structures with nonprofit versus for-profit organizations. So for-profit businesses, you could be an LLC, you could be an S Corp or a C Corp, you could be a B Corp, which is actually a good option if you're looking to do some social enterprise, social good work, but also function as a for-profit organization. If you have questions about that, our sister company, Mockingbird Analytics, is actually a B Corp, and I can answer some questions about that afterwards. But also you could be a partnership, you could be a sole proprietorship. There's lots of different options for being a for-profit organization. So definitely, if you're not sure if the nonprofit model is right for you, explore some of those, particularly the B Corporation status. That does not exist in every state, though. A couple of specific things to consider about the nonprofit structure, though, is the purpose of your organization is different than a for-profit. In a for-profit, the purpose is to make money. In a nonprofit, the purpose is to create more social good. And the IRS definitely wants to make sure that the work you're doing creates social good. The funding options are very different. Having nonprofit status actually opens up a lot of doors that are not open to for-profit organizations. You can accept charitable donations that are a write-off for the giver. You can apply for grants. You can apply for many government contracts. There are lots of things that are not available to for-profits that you are able to access when you are a nonprofit. The only thing I would say that is available to a for-profit that is not available to a nonprofit is oftentimes like venture capital, angel funds. They don't want to fund nonprofit work because they're looking to profit. The other thing about running a nonprofit is that the governance and ownership are very different. In a for-profit organization, you do not have to have a governing board. In a nonprofit, you have to have a governing board of a minimum of 3 people. This varies from state to state. So definitely if you're not in California, go look up your state. I will have a link to a state breakdown at the end of this presentation for you guys. So you have to have a board as a nonprofit. The IRS mandates it. And also when you found a nonprofit, you were not technically the owner of it. The owner is the public because, and I'm going to skip down to taxes versus transparency for a second. What you exchange with the IRS for having nonprofit status is you don't have to pay taxes. Well, in exchange for not paying taxes, the public owns your nonprofit, and you have a governing board who sits within your organization to represent the interests of the public. Does that make sense to everybody? So you as the founder, again, you don't own it, which means that you, if the governing board votes to say, Jessica is not acting within the interests of the public, I can be kicked out of an organization that I founded. This is obviously very rare and not something you should be afraid of unless you are using your nonprofit as a tax shelter and your board discovers that. But it's something important to note because people are obviously scared of that. I did all this work, I could be kicked out. Keep in mind, it's actually the public, and what you are exchanging is those, you don't have to pay corporate taxes. The other thing that's different about nonprofits is profits and your salaries are dealt with differently. If you charge for your services, that is okay. However, what you do with the money that you profit from is very different. In a for-profit, that money gets put into shareholder bonuses. You can take home those profits as the founder. It's up to you what you do with those profits. However, with nonprofits, all of the money that you get from providing your services that's not expenses is has to be cycled back into the work that you're doing to do more social good. No bonuses in nonprofit land. Salaries also need to be based on market value. That varies geographically significantly, but that's also why you're not going to be a millionaire running your nonprofit. Then taxes versus transparency. Again, what you're trading off with the IRS, you're making a benefits exchange for the taxes you would normally pay. You are being required to provide a higher level of transparency and work at a higher ethical level, because you have that board sitting there requiring you to do the work at a towards the social good that you promised to do. The other thing to note is that if you are filing to become a nonprofit, technically you incorporate as a corporation first, and then after you submit your 1023 application to the IRS, then you become tax exempt and a nonprofit. This is really important to remember when you were filing, because the IRS works on the calendar year. So if you become a corporation in 2022 but don't receive your tax exempt status until 2023, then you have to pay those corporate taxes for 2022. And the IRS processing time is 4 to 6 months unless you get it expedited. So if you were looking to found a nonprofit this year, I would submit your articles and your 1023 application like immediately, or wait till January. Last but not least, public service loan forgiveness. You, as the founder and anybody working full-time for your nonprofit, can qualify for public service loan forgiveness for running your own nonprofit. You just have to have your board sign off on it. Those rules are changing in flux right now, but it's definitely something to consider if you have student loans. It could be really helpful. Again, if you have questions about all this, drop this in the chat. I will answer all of those when we get to the end. So next up, where should you get started with your idea? The answer to this is market research. Most of the people that come to us to start nonprofits need to do a little bit more market research. The way to do this in very simple terms is, number one, define who your target population is, compare who else is serving the population that you want to serve, how are they doing it, and then articulate why your work might be different. Is it just about we're serving people in a geography that's not served by those other people, or we're doing something slightly different to accept a slightly different population? But know who else is on the market doing the work. These will be your partners moving forward. You're going to have relationships with other nonprofits. No one organization is going to solve homelessness by themselves without mental health organizations, without substance abuse organizations, without organizations that support families and pets, that work with foster care agencies. None of us are going to do this alone. So it's really important to both define why you're unique, but also understand who is going to be your partner in the work. Next, in your market research, look for the 990 forms of other organizations. Everybody's 990s can be found, or should be found, on guidestar.org, also known as candid.org. So take a look at those 990 forms. They are, in lieu of a tax statement, what nonprofits are required to file annually to show this is the work we did, this is the money we received, and how it was spent. So it's like taxes, except you don't have to pay for it. You just have to file the information. But that will contain a lot of information about how other organizations that you're interested in working with get funded, how they work, what everybody is paid. All of this is public record. The last thing to do is conduct a community needs assessment. It's really important to make sure that when we go into a community to start doing the work, we make sure we're providing the actual services the community needs. We might think as a member of a community we know, but it's really important to get some community-based data and feedback about what is actually needed. This will strengthen the work that you do, strengthen your connection to the community in getting clients and providing services, and also give you some data to work with when you start looking for funding and talking about why this work matters. So let's talk some of the technical details about steps to register a nonprofit. These steps and fees are going to vary from state to state. Again, I have a chart that I'm going to give you to look up what happens in your state. But the first thing that everybody has to do is file for an EIN. This is really easy, costs $0, takes 20 minutes, you'll be good. Very easy. All you really have to have is the name of your organization and an address. This is basically your Social Security number for your organization. Once you have that EIN, you should be able to open a bank account. This is also really important to have going in. After you get that EIN, then you can file your articles of incorporation. There are different costs for different states. California, where I'm located, $30, New York, $75, Texas, $25. And this takes about a month for the state to get back to you saying, okay, now you're a corporation. Once you get those articles of incorporation, the next step you should take is have your first board meeting and elect officers. Your board members for your nonprofit are going to have to sign off on your bylaws in order to submit your application to the IRS. You have to have this meeting first before you become a nonprofit. The IRS wants to know that you have a board in place ready to support your organization, ready to provide that level of ethics and transparency before they will approve your nonprofit status. Other things the board should do in that first meeting are sign conflict of interest agreement. And then maybe before you submit your application, but within 90 days of getting your articles of incorporation, you should file in California what's called a statement of information. This is just the state checking in to be like, okay, who's in charge and how do we get in contact with you? And nonprofits only need to file a new statement of information every 2 years. If you want a certified copy, I think it costs like $25 or $30. It's very easy. But you need to file that statement of information within the first 90 days of getting your articles of incorporation in California. Not all states require that, but some do, so check with your state. The next step after you get all of your bylaws in place is to file your 501c3 application. There are 2 different types of forms that you might be tempted to file. You can either file the regular 1023 or the 1023 easy form. The IRS charges $600 to process your application. That is non-refundable if they do not let you become a nonprofit. It's just the processing fee. Everybody has to pay it. And like I said, the average wait time is 3 to 6 months, but probably on the longer side, 4 to 6 months. Definitely, it takes them time to make a decision, and they have the right to come back with questions for you to clarify as well. After you get your 501c3 application approved by the IRS, you're officially finally a nonprofit. Then in most states, you need to go back to the state and let them know that, okay, now I'm a nonprofit. In California, what you have to do is register with the Attorney General's Office of Charitable Trust. And that I think is like another $30 fee. And then you have to renew that every year. So if you have any questions about that process, drop them in the chat. Really, it's just a 4-step process for everyone, and then a 5th step in some states. So, but it does take, on average, I would give yourself 6 to 9 months to officially get everything squared away to be a nonprofit. So, digging a little bit deeper into the 1023 form. Which form should you fill out? I know it's very tempting to fill out the 1023 easy form because it's easier. But short answer is most organizations should fill out the long form. 1023 easy is for people that plan on having just a very low sort of income of 50K or less per year for the next 3 years. You have assets coming in of less than 250K. The other thing about the 1023 easy form is it's 3 pages versus 28. So it is easier. However, it is not the one that most people should be filing. I know it's so tempting, but don't do it. The reason is because it doesn't really ask any information about your organization or intended activities. And that means that people who are looking up your organization, potential funders, don't know that much about you. And they're a little more reticent to fund organizations that haven't filled out the full 990 and gotten the full vetting. The reasons you might want to use the 1023 is if you are putting together like a short-term project, like an event or a festival, or you're running like a super small nonprofit that is not going to be sort of heavily about fundraising. This could mean, like, I've seen people make their book club a nonprofit for some reason. They're fundraising to put out a documentary. They need to accept funds that are sort of tax deductible for people. So bottom line, if you have any intention of sort of growing your nonprofit beyond like running it on 50K a year, definitely just fill out the long form. They did just make it easier this year though, slightly, but it's still like kind of a beast. So the other thing that we want to talk about is fiscal sponsorship. This is another route to founding your nonprofit. Fiscal sponsorship is a pretty new idea. It is not officially like approved by the IRS, but they let it happen. Basically, what fiscal sponsorship means is you borrow the nonprofit tax status from an existing organization and then pay that organization to use that tax status. It's a little murky. However, it is sort of an accepted thing that exists and that you can do. And it is a good idea for some people because it lets them start accepting donations using that 501c3 tax status, and it helps get their project off the ground more quickly and lets them sort of try out nonprofit services, do a pilot project without the full 9-month commitment of applying and all of the things that go with that. So it's especially helpful if you're doing something time sensitive, you need to accept funds really quickly, or you're really looking to get started with extra support. It's not great if you are planning and bringing in more than 50K the first year, particularly because the sponsoring organization is going to take a percentage of that to give you all of those administrative services. If you are opening with significant assets like property, machinery, etc., you should just file your own 501c3. A lot of fiscal sponsors don't want to work with organizations that are coming in with significant assets. And by significant assets, I mean sort of things above 250K. And then also If you have really risky insurance requirements, you're dealing with a population that is hard to insure, work with, like sex offenders or very small children. Generally, you should get your own 501c3 status. The insurance gets really expensive if you're dealing with those populations. So some downsides. I want to be totally transparent too. Mockingbird Incubator does provide fiscal sponsorship services. If you are interested in that, you can contact us about that. We're happy to talk more about how we work. But generally, some downsides to fiscal sponsorship, because I want to be really balanced, is the cost is similar in the medium to long term. It will be less expensive and quicker to start up with a fiscal sponsor because they have everything in place, but pretty quickly those costs will even out. You also have to pay the fiscal sponsor for all of the administrative support they're giving you. Some fiscal sponsors charge a percentage of your revenue, some charge a flat fee. That varies between like 6 and 20% of whatever your revenue is. If you see above 20%, find somebody else. That's way too high. The other thing is not all foundations give to fiscally sponsored organizations for the same reasons we discussed earlier about there's not enough information. They're not sure sort of what's going to happen with the organization, generally because it's a startup thing and eventually people transition to being their own nonprofit. Some of the upsides to being fiscally sponsored, though, are that you get that immediate administrative assistance. You don't have to worry about a 990. Your sponsoring organization will file that for you. They're also going to help you with HR, financial options, bookkeeping, insurance, all of those things. So you don't have to worry about like getting quotes, finding a bookkeeper, all of those things. And it is much quicker than filing your own 501c3. Most sponsoring organizations take between a month to 3 months to get you set up instead of the like 6 to 9 months that it takes to deal with the IRS yourself. So let's move on from that. If you have fiscal sponsorship questions, drop them in the chat. I'll answer them, and you can always send us an email after that. I'm always happy to answer questions. So here are the things that you should create in advance before getting your 501c3 status. You can name yourself. You can put together a website. You should put together a .org website if possible. You can set up your social media accounts and start posting. You should also put together descriptions of the programs and services that you want to apply. And if it's applicable, start developing a curriculum. The more you can sort of do in advance and start providing services, the better. Because in order to get funding, it's very much sort of a chicken or the egg problem. A lot of funders require you to be doing the work before they will fund you. So the more sort of piloting of your services you can do, the better. Other things you could put together beforehand, job descriptions for everyone involved, even people that you would like to bring on later. Those will be helpful when you're looking for funding. You have to put together your board. In California, that's a minimum of 3 people. You should put together initial budgets. These can just be you throwing numbers like spaghetti at the wall just to see. It doesn't have to be completely accurate. Don't bang your head against the wall about it, but you should have some idea of what it costs to provide services. You will immediately be asked for a budget the minute you start applying for funding through grants. You should also create some success metrics so you can talk about your work and the impact you're having. And then take a look at partnerships with other organizations. Reach out to them to say, I'm founding this nonprofit. I would love to work together. You're providing complementary services. Can we refer to you? Will you refer to us when we get started? Those relationships are going to be what sustains you over time. A couple other helpful documents that you should create the first year. And these are going to be your roadmaps. These are going to be how you sort of demonstrate, even if you haven't done any work yet, what you plan on doing. So really important to have these to share and to sort of guide yourself in the first year. Strategic plan, very important. A development or fundraising plan. Okay, we need to raise X amount of dollars. These are all the things we plan on doing in our strategic plan. The development plan is sort of a degree more specific on how you plan on raising the money to support that work. Evaluation plan, this is all of the metrics. How are we going to talk about our work? How are we going to tell the story? You should put together grant boilerplate language, things like your organizational history statement, a needs assessment to help justify your work. All of this language you will have to adjust over time, for sure, but it's nice to have some writing in place. And last, marketing materials, have a brochure, have a one-page, have an info sheet, have statistics about the need. For example, like there are X number of homeless people living in your county. Those things are really important to have on hand, ready to go, to sort of justify this is why we need to do this work. So we're getting close to the end. Here are some of the resources that I talked about. Number one, IRS Most Asked Questions, very helpful. IRS Customer Account Services, here is the number to call them. If you have any questions, they're actually like surprisingly very nice. Every time we've called them on behalf of a client, they have been lovely. Form1023.org has lots of information about filing for you. Publication 557, all of the details you can look up about how nonprofits work. Everything I've said today is based on all of these resources, so I'm not just making this up. And then here, Harbor Compliance is an organization that works on compliance for nonprofits. They have a board governance by state chart that is very helpful with, okay, how many board members do you have to have? What positions do they need to be? Are there term limits in your state? It gets into the nitty-gritty for every state. So just Google Harbor Compliance Board Governance State. If you do need help filing your 1023 form, the organization in California that we work with is BetterHelp, and their website is inbetterwetrust.com. We love them. We recommend them all the time. We do not do the filings. We are not lawyers, so we can't give legal advice to you about tax status. But my recommendation is always that prior to filing, get a review either by an accountant or somebody that does taxes who has submitted 1023 applications before, or get somebody to help you file. Even if it's just a review, it's worth it to make sure that you check the right boxes. Our accountant, Nishan, is always filing correction forms with our clients because we send everybody to her, and she is always like, I wish people would just run this by me before they do it. So definitely get a review. So I'm going to jump in and talk a little bit about our nonprofit incubator program now, and then I'll get into questions. So our incubator program, the next one, our fall cohort, starts September 24th. It runs for 6 weeks on Saturdays, 10 a.m. Pacific time. We meet every week for around 2 hours, give or take, and we go through all of the steps that you're going to need to create a strategic plan, get your board set up, get started with fundraising, get your initial marketing in place. So it is really helpful with building your infrastructure. We do not work on ideation in our incubator program. It is purely administrative infrastructure. How do you run a nonprofit? The other thing that I want to share with you is that we are partnering with the Nonprofit Cooperative this year, and 3 of the founders that we have in our program this year are going to receive a $4,000 seed funding grant and get their cost of the incubator program covered, in addition to getting a whole bunch of other like mentorship and services by them. They're so cool and doing such good work. We're so happy that they are sponsoring 3 of our participants this year. So if you are interested in joining our incubator program, I have a link to the application on my last slide here. The deadline to apply is August 31st. So definitely submit your application if you're interested in that. There is no catch there. They just are going to fund 3 people with $4,000 extra support services and cover the cost of the program. If you don't get selected for that grant, we also were given scholarship money by some of our partners to reduce the cost of the program. So if you are interested in participating but haven't been selected by the Nonprofit Cooperative, the cost of the program is just $250 per person now. It used to be $500. We got a sort of 50% scholarship for everybody who wants to participate. It was really like an exciting moment, like my heart burst. So we would love to have you. The program is for people like yourselves who are in the midst of founding a nonprofit. You're stepping into an ED role and really need a grounding in administrative nonprofit development infrastructure. It's really important that we have everybody participate and show up and be ready to learn, because we also, in addition to the $4,000 scholarships seed funding that the Nonprofit Cooperative is giving out, our board for the incubator also gives out a $3,000 grant at the end of the program to everybody, to one organization, not everybody, who completes the program and they feel like, oh, this is such a good idea. We want to fund this. So apply $4,000 through the Nonprofit Cooperative potentially, and then an additional $3,000 for everybody that completes. Some questions that always get asked, can your team participate? Yes, we just do sort of a per person rate. And whoever on your team is available and wants to, the most important thing is they're able to attend consistently. So we oftentimes have, if you have co-founders, we'll have like a group of 3 founders that come through the incubator together so that they hear all the same things. Some other resources, just in case you're interested, for people that are on the fence about, is nonprofit status right for me, unsure, want an initial grounding before jumping into the incubator program, we are releasing a self-paced starting a nonprofit course that you can do. And this is great for people who are still really in the ideation phase, still really deciding, like, is being a nonprofit right? If you want to get more into grant writing for your organization and funding, we have a separate course called Grants Anatomy. And then if you want additional consulting services, we're always here. Last but not least, we are doing a conference September 14th, right 10 days before the start of our program. We would love to have you. When we send out the email after this presentation with the slides and the video, we'll send you a discount code to come to our Mobilize Your Nonprofit conference, where we're going to be talking about a lot of the nitty-gritty of nonprofit administration. We're going to have our employment lawyer there. We're going to have a accounting and bookkeeping budgeting panel. We are going to have a tech panel. We're going to have a panel with some of our clients to talk about how you integrate justice into the administration of your work. So we would love to have you. You can sign up on our website and I'll send you the discount code today or tomorrow. So here's all of our contact information. I'm going to open the chat now so that I can start answering questions. I'm going to start from the bottom. So is there a standard job structure or description to start? I'm not quite sure what you mean, Larissa. Can you describe a little bit more? How to hire when you don't have funds at the beginning? Well, I mean, you don't hire. You have lots of volunteers. You have people doing the work to demonstrate that it should be funding. It's a pretty vicious chicken or the egg issue. Lots of organizations get stuck with that. The one thing I'll say, because it's just a whole can of worms, is that diversification of your income sources is the best way to have funding stability. You cannot count on grant funds, partially because they take forever, but also grants are very competitive. Lots of people apply. There's no sort of guarantee with grants. The best place to start with funding is generally individual donors and your own network. Tiffany, yes, the program is 100% virtual. You do not have to be anywhere except in the US. We are only accepting US-based nonprofits. We had a couple Canadian nonprofits apply, and I sadly had to tell them, unfortunately, because the information is so specific, because we talk about governance and fundraising in the US, it wouldn't apply. But yes, you can be anywhere in the world as long as you're running a US-based 501c3 nonprofit. So another question from Tiffany, do you know if I fill out the form 1023 on pay.gov electronically or download the form and submit it another way? Also, are there ways to get assistance other than the IRS? So the last time I looked, the 1023 form, the full long form, can only be downloaded and sent a hard copy. It's just the 1023 easy that can be done online. And then, are there other ways to get assistance? I mean, you could ask a lawyer, to review, an accountant. We don't have specific resources because we don't provide that service. I know some of our clients have used like LegalZoom previously. I don't have any sort of specific feelings or recommendations there. Tasha, I am in Southern California near Pasadena. And then could you tell us more about how to choose the right board members and their tasks? Part of our incubator program is an entire workshop on board governance, who needs to be on your board, all of those things. We get into that. It is, like everything with nonprofits, it is a can of worms. There are a lot of rules around boards. Liz, thank you for dropping the GuideStar link. That's great. Yes, everybody's 990s should be on GuideStar. We, as part of our grants readiness work with clients, tell them you have to make your GuideStar profile at least bronze rated before we will work with you. Let's see. Another question, what's the difference between the 1023 and the 1023 easy? I mean, the 1023 easy is easier, like we discussed. 1023 regular form is longer, includes more information for the IRS to sort of assess what you're planning to do. And what is included in the articles of incorporation, a lot of stuff about like how your corporation is going to work. I would just Google a template and start from there. It depends on the state you're in, what those requirements and that template will look like. Could I repeat what I said about taxes? Tiffany, can you remind me what I was saying specifically about taxes? 501c3, what are the articles? The articles of incorporation is the second step in filing to become a nonprofit. Okay, I'm going back down to the beginning. The first slide about taxes. Let me go back. I mean, so Larissa, you were asking about job descriptions to start with. Yes, you could just Google like an executive director job description and then just sort of edit it to your organization specifically. Tiffany, I'll go back to the slide, then you'd let me know which one it is. So this one, where we talk about like taxes versus transparency. And then the sort of purpose of the organization and the benefits exchange. I'll just sort of like repeat this section. When you file to become a 501c3 nonprofit with the IRS, you basically are telling the IRS, in exchange for not paying taxes, I will work up to this higher level of ethics and transparency. So that's why you are required to have a governing board for those, to provide that extra level of sort of oversight within your organization. You also do not own your nonprofit because the public owns it because you're not paying taxes on it. Does that answer your question? Perfect. It's a little bit complex to think about because it's so different than for-profit. That's why we say running a nonprofit is so different than running a for-profit. It's a very specific mindset shift in order to make sure that you are running your organization up to the level of ethics that you are required to in order to create public good. So if anybody has any other questions, drop them in the chat. That was all I saw. If you have any additional questions for us, I'm going to go back to our contact information. You are welcome to email us. You are welcome to submit your application to the incubator. We would love to have you. Liz has a question. Do you work with affiliated C3 and C4 organizations or know of any resources about the unique process to set up both? What can and cannot overlap? Liz, we work with only 501c3s. We don't work with C4s. But if you want the people at BetterHelp APC in betterwetrust.com is their website. Send me an email and I will introduce you to like Sam and Birdie there. They should be able to help you. They were the ones that helped us set up all of the things that we needed to become fiscal sponsors. They're super smart and super nice. Okay, well, unless anybody has any questions, I will stick around. We are all done, but if you have any questions, feel free at any time to email us. We would love to have you in our incubator program. Again, the deadline to submit your application for the Nonprofit Cooperative grant is August 31st, and we are accepting fiscally sponsored orgs. As long as you're in the US, we will consider your application. So it was a delight, everybody. I look forward to seeing you all soon.